Some of you may have heard back in February or early March that there was a stop sale order for decox products in Canada, meaning that the Canadian distributor of Phibro Animal Health couldn't import decox products from the United States. We have learned the really good news just recently in the last couple of days that stop sale order has been overturned. We can import decox products into Canada again, which is fantastic news. And, thank you very much for all the advocacy efforts of the OSF chair who was in Ottawa and talking to the Minister of Agriculture and the Minister of Health and really brought this issue to their attention. So if there's not supply at your feed mill or your local co-op of decox products, just be patient because there will probably be a lag time to get these products back into the country. But they will be made available very soon. And there's more information through the distributor, Phibro Animal Health. Now let's get into today's episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Flock Talk. I'm Erin Morgan.
And I'm Walker Ball, and we work for the members of the Ontario Sheep Farmers.
Today, we're joined by Delma Kennedy to learn about setting newborn lambs up for success. Welcome back, Delma, to the podcast.
Thank you.
So before we dive in, tell us a little bit about yourself, Delma, and the work you do with sheep producers through the Ministry of Agriculture.
Okay, so I'm a sheep specialist with the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Agribusiness. I started out as an assistant coordinator of the sheep and swine performance testing programs and was primarily involved with genetic evaluation programs and doing extension on genetics and performance testing. But since 2010, I've been a sheep specialist. And so the role is more encompassing and includes sort of more of the general production subjects. And so what we do is we sort of do development, design, delivery of technical and educational materials. And so this means I need to be aware of what research is going on, whether there's any new technology or practices going on. So we kind of, look to other countries and what's going on online where we can to try and keep track of what might be interesting for the Ontario industry. And then I also provide industry expertise internally to our government system and encourage sort of sheep research where I see gaps in knowledge and industry issues aligning. And so just sort of an example of one thing that I might do is a while ago, one of the projects I worked on was body condition scoring. And so we always talk about the ewe being in the right body condition score. And I had a producer come up to me who'd maybe been in the industry for, 6 or 7 years and said, you know what, I can't do this, right? I understand, but when I go to do it with my ewes, I don't know if I'm doing it right. And so I ended up sourcing some body condition score models out of Australia. And so now we do workshops with those, and they also are used in training vet students so that we're all on the same basis and we know, yes, this is a body condition score 3.
Yeah, awesome. I've done that. It's hard. The body conditioning scoring, it's hard until you use your models and then you get a better understanding of it.
Yeah. And then the live animal, changes everything.
Yes. Then they move around on you.
Yes.
Oh, man. So from your perspective, Delma, how much of a lamb's success is determined before it's even born?
So there's a significant portion of success that happens prior to birth. And so if we go back to body condition scoring, that has a huge impact, right? Because the body condition score of that ewe is going to affect how well that lamb develops and how well that ewe herself is set up to give birth and lactate. So that's the first thing. And then also, even further with the ewe, something as straightforward as vaccination, right? We always think about ewes need to be vaccinated, 4 to 6 weeks before birth. And you try and get that done, you want to get that done, all of those things, but it actually turns out to be quite critical in how it affects the colostrum quality. and how well that lamb might be set up for survival sort of 2 to 4 weeks out. Um, and so lots of things affect that. And so if you have for example, if you have a thin ewe that's giving birth to multiple lambs, that lack of nutrition can affect the lamb's birth weight, the lamb's ability to withstand cold, the lamb vigor, whether he's shaking his head around a lot or not, the ewe's bonding behavior. If she's thin and doesn't feel good, she maybe isn't interested. The colostrum quality, as I mentioned, can also be affected if she's thin, right? And the quantity of colostrum, and then the milk production after that, all affected by how many resources she has and the condition she's in. And even at mating, like they've done some work where, you look at a body condition score of a ewe at mating and you think, okay, I've got the whole gestation to make sure she's in the right place and the right body condition score by lambing. And at breeding, they still found there's an effect on birth weight, right? So if
Wow.
she's under a 2 at mating, that lamb's going to be a little smaller than if she
Mhm.
was a 3. So big difference throughout the whole management cycle. Another thing that makes a difference is genetics, right? So right back to when you actually do the breeding and choose who you're going to breed to, there's recent research out of the US that they did with Katahdin sheep, and they found that ewes selected for parasite resistance had a better response to vaccination, which improved their colostrum quality, and more antibodies were transferred to their lambs, which
Oh,
improved lamb survival. And how this came about was they'd been selecting for parasite resistance to be able to withstand parasites. And then they noticed that when they were lambing those low fecal egg count ewes, they had less mortality in the lambs. And so they went back and said, why is this happening? This seems really strange. And that's what they found. So we can select for better immune systems. So going forward, as we figure out better ways to do that, if we can, improve those immune genetics, that's also going to help set up our lambs for success when they're born as well.
wow. So really, it's good to have meat on you. It's good to have maybe a higher quality for
Yeah,
that's all the fashion industry that.
that's right. You need resources if you're going to produce lambs.
That's right.
Delma, does it impact conception rate as well? A better body condition? Like, do you
Ye-
see lower conception rates?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So
Okay.
if they're low, and like it varies a little bit by breed and situation. And what happens is the average conception rate will be lower for those thin ewes.
Mhm.
But that doesn't mean that every thin ewe does not breed.
Right.
And so what happens is, it's easy to look at the situation and say, well, I think it's okay because this ewe was thin and she had 3 lambs. So, we're doing good.
Right.
But if they were all 3, you'd have better conception than if they're 2 or under.
Okay. So we've covered sort of before lambing and preparation for lambing, but right after a lamb is born, what are the most critical things you're looking for in those first few minutes to make sure the lamb is set up to survive and thrive?
Well, and I guess the first thing is if you actually see the birth, right?
Right.
One of the things that that you want to do is just take a quick look and make sure that placenta is cleared from the mouth and the nose and that the lamb starts breathing, right? Because every now and then you can get a thicker, more viscous placenta. If you've got a ewe quickly having another lamb, maybe she doesn't clear it as quick as she should or something like that. So if you happen to be standing there, it's, good practice just to clear that away quick. And ideally the ewe is going to do that, and it's part of bonding, but you wouldn't want to not do it if she wasn't going to get to that in this particular case. And then the next thing is if you're lambing in the barn and they're not already in a pen, you want to look at how you're going to get them moved to a lambing pen sort of with no fuss, easily, quickly, because you don't want to interfere with that bonding process. and disturb anything, but you also want to protect them from other pregnant ewes who are going to come along and say, hey, maybe I want that lamb, and start interfering with the process. So that's sort of what you want to do in the first few minutes. And then the ewe is going to hopefully be taking over, right? She's going to be licking and nudging at that ewe, which helps make that bond happen, right? And so she's going to encourage that lamb to stand and get to the udder. The other thing is, if you're moving that ewe into a pen, one of the things that you might want to do in those few couple of minutes is just quick take a strip out of each side of the udder and make sure, one, that she has milk, and two, that this sort of waxy, plug that's in there is stripped out so the lamb can suck easier. And then you already know if there's going to be milk problems or not, because if there isn't anything for some strange reason, you need to flag that and come in with your colostrum earlier. And so other than that, you don't want to do much in the first few minutes because you don't want to disturb that bond that's starting to happen.
Wow. Yeah, I keep learning so much about how these ewes will try to steal babies. It's just crazy. So, you had mentioned colostrum, and we hear a lot how critical it is, but where do you actually see things going wrong in practice? And how quickly do you decide that it's time to step in versus waiting?
So the big thing with colostrum is that it's time critical. And so, if we're assuming that our colostrum's of good quality, our most important thing is timing, right? Because lambs are born with no circulating antibodies because the placenta doesn't allow the ewe antibodies to transfer across the placenta. And so lambs have to get their immunity from the ewe colostrum to use while their own immune system starts to respond and get some resources of its own for the outside environment. So the ewe antibodies concentrate in the udder towards the end of pregnancy, and then get used in making the colostrum. But the concentration of antibodies in the colostrum is highest at birth. 12 hours later, it's reduced by about 25%. And by 24 hours, it's reduced by 75 to 100%.
Wow.
So time is a thing. And then complicating this timing problem is the gut of the lamb can only absorb those large antibodies for a short time. So the best is the first 6 hours. And then you get less efficient absorption from 6 to 12. And then you get drastically reduced by 12 hours with gut closure at 24.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So the lamb makes the situation even worse because he's got to get those in those first few hours to make it work.
Right.
And so the recommendation, right, is to feed 50 mils per kilogram. And so what can happen is you've got this problem because ewe colostrum's best. Maybe you've got a situation where you think maybe she's not going to have enough for all of the lambs. And so you're thinking that maybe you want to top some up. You're into this gut closure problem where, you really need a good feed in the first 6 hours. And so you want to make sure that, first of all, with any luck, every lamb gets ewe colostrum, because anything you supplement with isn't going to be as good as ewe colostrum. So you want them to get some of that. But then you really want them to have a full colostrum feeding in that first 6 hours or as soon as possible. So if you had a 5 kilogram lamb, then that's 250 mils. So you might, if my lamb was 5 kilograms, I know he's gotten some off the ewe. I know she doesn't have enough for everybody. Then maybe I take a feeding tube and I top him up till he's full. And I see that, then I can see how much he's getting with the feeding tube. So maybe I get another 150 into him and I think, okay, now he's pretty good. And I've hit that 6 hour window, which can make a big difference for him.
That's amazing. So newborn lambs are pretty vulnerable to cold stress, or can be. So what makes you look at a lamb and think that this one's at risk, versus some of the other ones? And when it comes to managing the cold stress, what mistakes do you commonly see?
So, so I guess the first thing to think about is that, when lambs are born, they're wet and they have a large body compared to their weight.
Mhm.
And the only the only fat they really have on their body at that point is what they call brown fat. And this brown fat metabolizes really quickly. And that's to keep them warm, help them get up and start drinking because they have to do all of these things right away when they're born. But the brown fat stores only last 5 to 6 hours. And smaller lambs will have less than bigger lambs. And then once that brown fat runs out, even if it's a good temperature outside and you're comfortable, if he's run out of brown fat, he doesn't have energy to thermoregulate. He is not going to stay warm. He's going to get cold. And so this is the issue. And so then if you're lambing in the winter or outside in the spring where there's wind, those brown fat stores can be used up faster than if you're lambing in a dry, barn that's above zero. A dry barn above zero, he's probably got 5 hours with that brown fat for a, good sized lamb. But it can quickly change depending on the circumstance. And so what you'll see is you'll see a lamb if he's already standing so there's two scenarios, right? First scenario is the lamb doesn't get up. So if a lamb isn't getting up, there's an issue, right? And generally, if you put your finger in their mouth, you're going to feel that cold mouth and you're going to go, wow, he's lost temperature. He needs help. So then you're into, the resuscitation stage.
Oh,
and And it is amazing what they can come back from at that early age. So you're looking for a lamb that didn't get up. You're also looking for a lamb that's up but is starting to hunch, right? So they'll hunch their back, their front legs, they'll be a bit closer together, and their head will be down, right? They usually hold their head down a bit, and often the mouth isn't always cold at that point, but it'll start to feel cool if you feel his mouth.
Hmm.
And so a common mistake would be to think that particular lamb is okay or will be okay. It just needs a little more drink and it'll be fine, which is true, except that, if they're less than 24 hours old and they're working on brown fat, they might not have enough resources to actually go get that milk. And what happens with lambing time, of course, is that, you're crazy busy. They're coming at once in lots of cases. If you've got 30 ewes who lambed and you're running around, you look at that lamb and say, he can wait, right? And then sometimes you don't see him. You come back and he's gone and you think, he was fine. But maybe he's not. He probably just laid down with some other lambs and he's still not drinking.
Mhm.
So, some people will come up with systems where, if you see a lamb like that, you can't deal with it right now, you put a spot on so that you can come back and find him and things like
that's
that.
smart. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then the other thing is if they're less than 24 hours old, the other problem is even if he can come back from that without your help, he's probably not getting enough colostrum. Right? He needs a significant volume of colostrum to get good immunity. And so then that lamb, even if he does live through that, might turn out, 3 days from now, 4 days from now, might die.
Oh, that's so
So
interesting.
so just things that you need to look at. And then the other thing is those lambs that have had a difficult birth. You need to watch for because some of those lambs won't thermally regulate properly. You warm them up, you feed them, everything looks good. They're with their mother, everybody's bonded, everybody's happy. You come around 6 hours later and the lamb's cold again. And you do it again, the lamb's cold again. And it's just in the birth process, things aren't quite right. And sometimes, you get 2-3 days in and the lamb will be fine. But this can be a problem.
Can I just ask, how how common is that knowledge for producers? Like when you're educating Delma, is this something that's coming as a shock in terms of brown fat and all of these, these vital steps that are happening in those first few hours? Is this something that's most people are aware of, or is this kind of a something that is kind of going on the down low for people?
I think I think most people are aware of those things. And, if they're not doing some of these things, it's a time factor, right?
Mm,
It's something where, because the thing is when you're lambing, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of things that are going on. And so sometimes you're making choices because of time pressures rather than saying, hey, has it been 6 hours? And the other thing is do you have systems in place that help you do those things easily, right? Like
sure.
if you're counting on knowing if the lamb is 6 hours old, it might not work out if 30 ewes lamb, right? And
Right.
so but if you have something, some system where you put lambs in pens in a certain order and have some sort of clock system that tells you approximately when these animals were born, then you can make much better decisions on should I make
Yeah.
sure they are topped up with colostrum if they're looking a bit hungry or not, right?
Mm, that's a good tip. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I was curious. So one of these smaller steps in the beginning, few hours is naval care, and I'm sure that can feel like a small step for people. But where do you see it going wrong, and what are the real consequences if it's missed?
And so with naval care, sometimes that can be a discussion with producers, right, on whether you really need to do it or not. And I guess the biggest thing to remember is that, that navel is a highway into the vascular system of that lamb. And it also has sort of a direct path to the liver as well. And so that's a problem because our barn environments are not that sterile. And so, you know, if it was, it wouldn't be that big of a deal, right? But it's not. And so depending on how clean your environment is, will depend how much of a problem you have or you don't have if you don't do good naval care. And so if you're lambing on grass and it's lush, beautiful grass in the spring, you might get away with more there than you do, say, in the barn. But it depends. It depends what bacteria are on the ground in the pasture as well. Um, and so if you don't do it, um, usually what you see is joint ill. And so that what you end up having is small, sort of lame, arthritic lambs. And so, you'll if you go to a farm and you see a pen of lambs and they're all the same age, and there's a few that are small, thick knees, maybe a bit lame, they've got joint ill. Probably didn't get good enough naval care to protect them. And so dipping instead of spraying, you have a better chance of covering everything. The other thing that can happen is if the umbilical cord is really long, if it touches the ground, it acts like a wick.
Uh-oh.
And so
Yeah.
the bacteria can just like be pulled right up there. And so, sometimes people are more meticulous about, nipping that a little bit shorter if it's really long or not, but that can make a difference. The other thing is that, even when you start dipping navels, how clean is that solution after a few lambs, right? How often do you change that? Because, it does make a difference. Like even if you're dipping, the dip can only do so much. And what the dip's doing is it's trying to kill any pathogens that happen to be already on the lamb there and help dry it up and heal the area sooner to stop the bacteria from getting in. And then the other thing is like, even if they've got joint ill, it's not very treatable. And so the lamb usually lives, but you've got this, small, knobby-kneed, lame animal that won't grow well.
Wow. So, how important is ewe-lamb bonding in those early hours? And what are the warning signs that it's not happening properly?
So, so the bond starts like immediately after birth. Like when she physically pushes that lamb out, it starts the hormone process for bonding. And the window for that is about 30 to 60 minutes. And so she starts to clean her lamb, and that's when she learns the scent of her lamb, and that's when she figures out that this one is hers and the one, 30 feet over is not hers. And so it's really important for the ewe to keep track of her lambs without interference during that time, or she can get confused, right? This is how you get lambs with the wrong ewes and ewes with the wrong lambs. You get mixing happening. When you get those ewes that come around and try and steal a lamb, if they do successfully steal that lamb, because you're not even there, they have no milk yet, and they're walking around with a baby lamb, and the mother doesn't think it's hers.
Right.
And so not great. So so these are the problems. And the other thing is that, if they let everybody drink, then, how are the lambs going to get enough milk? Right? Because you get into issues with that. And colostrum, right? If she doesn't guard herself from only her own babies, other bigger lambs will come and drink her colostrum.
Whoa.
And so it is sort of a necessary thing, but it can be a problem if she doesn't want the lamb, of course. Then we'd like them to be less bonded. um, and so the warning signs, right, if you're not seeing that, is really that you'll see the ewe bunting a lamb, right, or jumping away from the lamb, or she isn't as interested in the lamb as she should be. But usually you see those consequences later rather than in that first 30 to 60 minutes. And what you often see in the first 30 to 60 minutes is maybe a ewe lamb that might give birth. She drops that lamb and runs instead of turning around and realizing, hey, this is mine, and doing the bonding process.
I've seen that TLC show.
Yeah. So if you catch it, if you're standing there and you get her in a pen with that lamb, you're still in the 30 to 60 minute window. She's probably going to come around and say, hey, I do have a job here, right? But if this happens, in the middle of the night and you're having a snooze, when you come back, you don't even know who had that lamb. And so you're raising a baby lamb. You're raising an orphan. Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
and then
fascinating.
And then again, after a difficult birth, right, the lamb is at a greater risk for rejection because, just if a lamb caused you a lot of pain, she's maybe going to look at him and say, I don't care. I don't love you.
Yeah.
Right.
It's enough out of you.
Oh, my goodness.
She's maybe not going to do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, man. I'm going to tell my mom that because I had a difficult birth, and I'm just going to thank her.
That's right.
I'm going to thank her for that. That
Thank
is
her
so
for sticking around.
Yeah. Well, now I can see what yous do, But in Zambia, which is where I was born, they give you, there are 3 different nicknames that they give you based on your birth type. And it's Vi, which is a fricative B. So it's a BV sound. So Vi. So you'd say Walker Vi, which mean like Walker of difficult birth. So we can start naming the lambs that.
That's right.
Okay, so Delma, you've given such great detail, so I feel like this question's a little bit obsolete, but I'm going to ask it just in case there are extra details. Is there anything else in those first 24 hours that producers need to be consistently monitoring?
Well, so I guess, we sort of covered that they need colostrum, they need to be dry, they need to be clean with dipped navels and a chance to bond. One of the other things is that the ewe needs feed and water. And without these things, she's going to start losing interest in those lambs and worry more about that feed and water after, 2 or 3 hours. And because her body's ramping up for milk production. And so, sometimes people have systems where they don't give them water because the lamb can fall in the bucket, right, and drowned and things like this. But, in the long term, it's better to come up with a system that allows you to give her that, because then she's going to do better on the colostrum side. She's going to do better on the lactation, and she's going to look after those lambs a little better as well. And then you really need to, consistently monitor those lambs for signs of starvation over the first week, right? Are they hunching? Is their mouth cold? So you want to be walking pens. And one of the things that happens is, you could see a cold lamb standing there hunched up, but that lamb will also go and lie in a heap of lambs. And so you need to make sure that if there's a group of lambs laying down in those early days, that you get them up and make sure that they're getting enough feed and they're not actually lying down because they're trying to keep warm and they're lethargic because of lack of food.
That makes sense. Oh, man.
So, Delma, if there's one thing producers take away from this conversation, is there sort of one big takeaway that will make the biggest difference in lamb survival?
So I guess my biggest sort of one takeaway is that details matter, right? So at a time when you're busy, you're tired, you don't actually have time to do all the things that need to be done. You need to set up systems so you don't have to think about it in the moment, and you just do it. And then when lambing's done, you can think about what worked well, what needs to be improved or adjusted for next time, so that you can try and rank your highest priority items and make sure they're getting done first. Because lambs are really tough, but they die easily, which sounds counterintuitive, but it seems to work that way. So getting the small things done consistently makes a really big difference over time.
A bit of a dichotomy there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We like a dichotomy though,
Yeah. Well, and it's because in those early days, like when you can come across a lamb that's, you're lambing in the winter, the lamb is like so cold, you feel like it's practically frozen, and you can revive those lambs if it hasn't been too long. It's amazing. That's why I say they're tough.
They're like those frogs that you put in the freezer. Sorry.
I don't put frogs in the freezer, but
I mean, it's the forever
deep
bringing
insights.
non-sheep related info to the podcast.
Deep insights from Walker.
I have to make it relatable, guys, to the non-sheep folks.
But yes, great. That is a great way to end it, Delma, with just, focusing on the little things. And probably if there is an issue, there is a simple solution, and it's going back and following the steps that you've outlined.
Yeah.
So thanks very much, Delma, for coming on and talking about the early days of lambing.
Thank you for having me. Happy to do it.
Amazing. And thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode of Flock Talk, please subscribe to your podcast app to receive alerts to our future episodes. And please share our podcast with your friends.
For more Ontario Sheep Farmers content, follow us on social media under the handle @Ontario Sheep Farmers on Instagram and Facebook. And please, would you visit our website, ontariosheep.org, for more resources.